Not just that, because you know I'm a black church guy. And you know that I'm going to talk to you about the history and the legacy of the black church. And you know that I'm going to find a way to tie everything back to this institution that I love so dearly. Let me show you a picture. Let me show you a picture of somebody. Let me show you a picture of somebody. You know who that is? You know who that is? That's George Liele. George Liele. Let me tell you why George Liele is so significant in history, black church history. George Liele is credited for organizing the first black church to ever exist. Now, this is debated, but it's widely accepted by black church study scholars and historians that the very first black church in existence was the Silver Bluff Baptist Church, Silver Bluff, South Carolina. George Liele was the itinerant preacher around whom Silver Bluff Baptist Church was formed. Okay, so Silver Bluff is considered to be, again, the first black church, visible black church in America. And again, there's debate. Some people say that first black church was in Virginia. All right. Now, George Liele will leave Silver Bluff, South Carolina, and he'll go to a region in Georgia called Yamacraw. And there in Yamacraw, he will organize a group of believers together, black believers together, and establish what later becomes the first African Baptist Church of Savannah, Georgia. The first African Baptist Church is considered to be the oldest black church in existence today. Not the first, because Silver Bluff is thought to be first, although Silver Bluff is currently defunct. The identity of Silver Bluff no longer continues. It's the church is still in operation, but it's not Silver Bluff. First African Baptist of Savannah, however, is considered to be the oldest visible black church that's still in existence today. You can still go to Savannah today. You can see First African Baptist. Why is George Liele important in this conversation about the 4th of July? George Liele was a loyalist. What does that mean? What is a loyalist? George Liele, he was not on the side of the quote-unquote patriots. George Liele was not with George and Paul and Thomas and all of the quote-unquote founding fathers. George Liele was a British loyalist. George Liele ultimately had to flee the country because he was a loyalist. He flees the country and he goes to Jamaica, and George Liele becomes the first Christian missionary abroad. George Liele, not Adoram Judson, George Liele, the first Christian missionary abroad. Why, though? Why does he flee? Because he is opposed to the independence movement. Not just George Liele, but George Liele had a companion by the name of David George. David George actually stays behind in Silver Bluff after George Liele goes to Yamacraw. David George actually stays in Silver Bluff to pastor the Silver Bluff Baptist Church. David George is a loyalist as well. He's loyal to Great Britain. David George also has to flee and leave the colonies because he's a loyalist. And he goes to Nova Scotia. He goes to Canada. And actually, if you want to have a conversation about the Black church in Canada, particularly the Black Baptist church in Canada, this is where it starts with Pastor David George. Later on, David George will go to West Africa and he'll become a missionary in West Africa. But both David George and George Liele, they were British loyalists. Why? Why didn't they sign up to fight with the Continental Army? Why weren't they right along Paul Revere and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton? Why? Because they recognized and realized the hypocrisy of a country fighting to secede from tyranny while simultaneously tyrannizing thousands of Black bodies on its own soil.